Yeah.
cut off a lot of fingers in Korea, all right? Like, you're going to have to be more specific.
It's like,
which one
dude,
were
I
you.
cut off one of your fingers. It's not like I cut off 4 or 5. Chill, you know?
You know what my name used to be? It used to be Dick Chopper, all right? But I changed the fingers.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched The Good, the Bad, the Weird.
Yeah, there's no and at the end of this.
No, there is not.
This is our final Korean movie of the month, and I don't think there's any real reason why we ended with this one. I think we just did the other ones first, but I think this is like a nice little like palate cleanser for some of the other crazier stuff we watched, like Old Boy and Mother. Where
When
this
you
is
say
just,
like crazier stuff, you mean more like super serious and depressing stuff
and violent.
and violent. Well, this is violent too.
Yeah, it is fake violence, and there's a lot of people that die or people you don't know, you don't really care about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just funny. This is a very funny movie, and I always think it's a sign that a movie is really funny if it makes you laugh in another language. Like The Untouchables was one that comes to mind, but like the fact that it can cross like language barriers to make other people laugh. I mean, I guess fart jokes and people falling down are funny in any language, but the fact that this makes me laugh so much, I think is kind of shows how good it is. And it's just like, you know, the action's a little over the top in places, but it's fucking awesome. It's over the top in a great way. And so this is just like a nice little enjoyable movie to end things off with. What'd you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're right. It's funny, but it's also fun, right? Like there's not it reminds me back in like those 2007 movies, 2006, 2007, that the studios just kind of pumped out here in the States, being all like, oh, it's just, here's some like mindless action to like, you know, keep you going. And even though like some of those have story, most of those did not have very good story. Those are just like fun adrenaline pumpers. This one felt like that in the sense that it almost kind of like, I'm almost ready to call it an epic just because of the grandiose scale that it entertained you on. But it had a really good story to go along with it. You know, it's a simple story. It's like one of treasure hunting. It's point A to point B, but the characters were interesting. And I think what really kept this movie really interesting is that it didn't really just have one main character. It kind of had three, hence the name, right? The good, the bad, and the weird. And that's what we'll kind of just call these three main characters while we talk about the film. And I think you'd agree with me on this, is that the movie probably mostly focused on the weird character, but it gave a lot of screen time to the other two, to the point where I think it's almost even, maybe because of the opening and the fact that he had the treasure map for a little bit longer than everyone else did. That's why. And then the other character that probably was on it the most was the bad, just because he was kind of like the whole movie's antagonist. And then the good kind of came in about, you know, once the last 80% of the movie, or really came in the last 80% of the movie, I would say. But yeah, no, it was really fun. And then I was trying to like describe it or like talk about it later to someone after I watched it. And it's funny to say, but that's when it occurred to me how like fun it was, is when I was like thinking back on it. I was like, yeah, we're doing Korea month. We're watching all these Korean movies. And I told him about Mother and Old Boy. And I just sounded like really depressed while I was describing them. And then I was talking about the good, the bad, the weird. And I was like, yeah. And then there was a train and then it blew up. And then the guy got spiked through the back because this guy who's really good at throwing spears. And I was like, yeah, so it's fun.
Well, to a point you made about like 17 points ago when you're talking about like American studios in 2006 and 2007, I was like, when did the movie Shoot 'Em Up come out? Paul Giamatti and Clive Owen, 2007, which is
Yeah.
literally just the studios being like, we're not even going to hide what this is. And I actually like that movie a lot. And I agree with you. I think just based on like screen time and how much they have to do the weird. I was reading an interview and it was basically like the weird drives the plot, the good drives the action, and then the bad drives sort of the drama of it, which is like exactly what this is. And I think
Can you
because
say that again?
the weird drives the story and the plot, the good, he drives the action, right? He is like the main action hero of this. Where he's, like,
Yeah.
flying all
And then
around.
the villain.
The bad is the drama, right? Like his
Right.
story of like going after the weird and all that. And I think that makes sense to it, and that also leads to the weird needing to have a little bit more screen time than the others. And I also think he's just probably, I don't think the others would disagree with this, that Kang Ho Song is just like the more accomplished actor of the movie. He's like one of the biggest,
Well,
at
because of
least
that.
over here, Korean stars over here that we know of, but over there as well.
Well, because of that, his character was probably the more interesting of the two. So, yeah.
And you're right though. This movie is just fun. Like in when we do these, I kind of take notes of like plot and all that, and it's just like, all right, we're in a fight scene. It's just a fucking badass fight scene. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot to say, but just like it's awesome. Like this moment is awesome, that moment is awesome. And then it just sort of ties it together with these cool stories. And the other thing too is like, have you seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly?
No, I haven't.
So the first time I saw this, I hadn't seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I saw this in theaters in like 2009 when it made it.
You
to
saw
theaters.
this film, The Good, the Bad, the Weird, in theaters?
I did. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's because it was back when I was in law school, and so I just like, instead of studying, just did like, there'd be like a random movie I'd go see, and then there'd be another trailer in front of it. And this one, I mean, when you watch the trailer for this, you're like, that looks awesome. And so, yeah, I really wanted to see it. And I did read that this made almost like no money in theaters over here, I want to say, or just not a lot, obviously. And I was like, I was some of those dollars. Like, it feels good.
It made exactly $513. I was part of the 13.
Let's just get into it, because this is I think this is the one that's pretty fun to talk about. So when the movie opens, they mention Manchuria a lot, and
Right.
I was like, is that a fake thing? Like, I've never heard of that. And it makes you realize the way we study history
It's
in the
really
US,
fucked.
it's like we
It's
care
really
about
fucked.
Europe.
Now,
Well, we learn like the Chinese dynasties, and then we
So-
get into like back to the US.
so when they talk about Manchuria a lot, I was like the Manchurian Candidate, like the movie.
Right.
So I looked up the movie, and I realized there were two movies. There's one back in the 60s, and then there was like, I guess, a remake or a retelling of it. So the retelling is about the Gulf War. So I was pretty sure that that's not what I was interested in. So I went back to the 60s one. I read about the plot of the 60s one. The 60s one took place during the Korean War. And so then I read about, I Wikipedia'd the Korean War, and I read about the Korean War, and I realized like, oh, it was during Japan's occupation of Korea and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, that's when this movie took place. So this movie takes place in the early 1900s, like 1910, around that.
Right. And Manchuria is, I believe, the term, when I looked it up, it's like the term that outsiders use to describe an area. I forget what the term for that is, but it's what like Japan, and then I think what we would have described this area of basically like modern day Korea Eastern China and Eastern Russia, just like that whole area, which is like right that borders the strait next to Japan, like the Pacific Ocean area next to Japan.
What's
And
interesting, well, I just want to say real quick that um, the way you described this movie to me was a spaghetti western, but Korean. And with the title, The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, I guess you could, come to that conclusion that it's the name is knocked off from our western, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. But I
that's
don't.
Italy's Western.
Italy's western, right?
We
But
just
I
take credit
don't.
for it.
But I don't believe that they share a similar plot, right? Someone who's seen both.
It's no, except for the ending is like very much an homage slash. They asked the director about it. Someone did, and he's like, is it a parody? Is it an homage? Is it a ripoff? And he was like, it's kind of all three. And I think the ending is this was a point I was trying to make earlier. I think the ending is the thing that gets closest to that, where you basically have what in 2010 you would have called a Mexican standoff, and in 2022 I no longer know what we call that. Which, by the way, the other day, I was watching the Great British Bake Off with my wife, and they were doing Mexican Week. And they, not that anything was offensive, but they just used a bunch of terms that white people in America would think was offensive. That, like,
You know what's funny though, and most of my work and business is done in Mexico, and a lot of my coworkers are Mexican, and I talk about this with them a lot. Is like, do you find this offensive? Do you find this offensive? Because apparently in America, I can't call you this or say this, and they're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like, no, none of this is offensive. And it's like if we call it a Mexican standoff, I was like, "Do you find that offensive?" I would put money on the fact that no one in that's actually Mexican from Mexico would ever find any of the half the stuff that we find offensive to say about them would find it offensive.
when they used the term on the Great British Bake Off, Mexican standoff, I was like, man, it's just so. It's like it's funny, just like the way that things like don't translate to like they don't know that in America we've decided that you probably shouldn't say that anymore. But anyway, like the ending of The Good, the Bad, and the Weird is similar in the you have three guys standing there who are like, who's
Oh
going to
my
shoot
god, just
who?
call it a Mexican standoff. We've established that that's okay.
Have we? I don't know. I'm not recording. We're not recording from England. It doesn't matter. I'm like, we're saying this tongue in cheek, but like the ending is very similar. Other than that, though, yeah, there's no. The story is. I don't know. I need to rewatch The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. It takes place during like the Civil Wars.
You mean the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Well, also Ashley got mad because we needed to record this quickly. Ashley was like, "Oh, I thought we were going to watch that together." I was like, "I don't have any time to wait for you anymore." So now, after we record this, I have to watch it again with her.
You know what's funny is Taylor said the same thing, especially since I go to Mexico tomorrow. She's like, "Yeah, I thought we were supposed to watch this." I was like, "Listen, you went on a work trip during the time that I had to watch this. It's not my fault that I now have to go on a trip. We'll watch it when I come back."
Should have just not rushed this, but yeah. Anyway, back to Manchuria. So that whole part was very interesting, and it's like at certain points, there's this white chick that I guess is supposed to be Russian that was at like the brothel, right? And then there's a bunch of characters that like the Ghost Market gang. I was like, they kind of almost look like Chinese or Mongolian, and I think they may have that was what they were supposed to be. And then there's
This is
Japanese.
the same thing. This is the same thing that happened in Man of Nowhere, where some characters were like, "Do you speak Korean?" And they had like the Chinese Korean translator. And so and in this movie, someone was questioning someone's fluency in Korean. And I was like, it's happening again. Is there some like fucking gang that's like Chinese and like I don't speak Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, nor I understand either language. So I'm just reading the subtitles. I'm like, motherfucker, are they all speaking Chinese right now? Like, what's happening?
Well, because at some points you'd have the weird who would be like, "Oh, I don't speak Korean," and he would say something, and I think it was his attempt at Chinese. And then other times people would speak to him, and he's like, "I only know Korean. Don't speak Chinese to me, or don't speak Japanese to me, or whatever." And
like
so,
the guys on the train, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The guys that what is his name? Kanemaru. That's the other thing too, is when you're watching subtitles and listening to it, it's like really hard to, sometimes they're speaking so fast because that's the language they know, and that's how we speak English, and it's like hard to pick up how they say names, right? Because like when I see it was Kanemaru, and I was like, I think that's a Japanese name, but I wasn't like picking up when they were saying it because they were talking so quickly. And then you see the character, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, for sure. Like, there's like Japanese flags in the.
If it ends in Maru, it's like 99% a Japanese name, and then if it has a hyphen in it, it is 99% a Korean name, and that's the only like rule I put in my head when I watch these. I was like, this is what I have to tell myself.
So the movie basically starts out is this kind of boss guy who's actually the big boss from the Man from Nowhere, plays this character. He tells the bad, like, hey, deliver this map to this Japanese guy and then steal the map back. Or he tells it to somebody and then he goes to the bad and he's like, hey, we're going to deliver this map to this Japanese general, steal it back.
Steal it on the way when it's on the train.
Right. And so then we get to the train and it's pretty cool. Like, you may not have caught this, but we're following the weird as he's going through the train, and he sort of bumps into the good, but you don't really know who that is at this way.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Park Do-won. And yeah, he kind of bumps into him, which you don't notice unless you've seen the movie before or like kind of maybe, I don't know, looked at the poster. But he goes through and he holds up the car with the Japanese general on it. And I really like how at the same time when the train gets stopped, like the Japanese guys pull a gun on him, and because the train stops, he just like falls. The weird falls over and just shoots everybody in like one motion, like as he's like getting knocked over by the train being completely stopped.
Yeah,
that part
he
was
kind of has.
awesome.
He kind of it's funny too, right? Because the weird has like blind luck. The good is actually the most skilled probably out of all of them, and then the bad is the most like bloodthirsty. Like he's the most ambitious out of all of them. At least that's how I looked at it. And it was interesting giving those like three really different characters those three really different traits, right? The other thing I noticed is that you first see the weird from the back, and it's the weird just because of his outfit immediately. Like it is such an iconic outfit with his little hat and his goggles, his motorcycle goggles and everything like that. And so he's the weird, and he's like posing as like a cookie salesman or something, and someone's like, oh, I'll have one, and he's like, he just sits him back down. He's like, nah.
Yeah.
And then when you see the bad, he has his hair in his face, and he's all like, he wears like a jacket, and he's like a popped collar, and he's
All black.
like moody, and he has eyeliner, and I'm like, and I hate. It's very like aesthetically pleasing, I guess, to have like your villain wear eyeliner, but you have to believe that that's the type of character that wakes up every morning, goes into the mirror and applies it. And that's not a character that I believe that would do that. But he had eyeliner on, and he was bad. And then the good just looked like a good guy with like, very like if Clint Eastwood was Korean, that's what that guy would look like,
And the other thing too, though, is something I read from the director, because when you watch this movie and it's got the names of it and you see that it's got three main guys, I think immediately in your head, you're like, all right, who's the weird, who's the good, who's the bad? And it's very easy to pick out based on the way they're dressed. But he was like, but I wanted to make the characters more complicated. And after reading that and thinking about it, it's like, they are, right? Because like we accept the good is good, right? But he's just a bounty hunter. We don't know,
right.
like what agency does he work for that he's like going after these people, and the bad is going after this guy who chopped his finger off. We find out in the end, and the weird is just going after money. So we're sort of ambivalent.
But
to,
also the
to
weird,
him.
the first time we meet the weird is he shoots up a train car full of seemingly innocent people, women and whatnot, and so it's like it's like a morally gray line that we have for all of these characters. And you know what? Maybe the good is named the good because, he's not good, but he's just really good at like everything he does.
And the bad's badass, and then the weird, it's like, it's so weird how he doesn't die. which I love how they establish that later. So the
I
bad
want to
starts
ask you about that, but yeah, go ahead.
the bad starts heading towards the Japanese car that the Weird's already robbed, and then he hears a gunshot, and there's this moment where he like recognizes the gunshot. You know what I mean? He like kind of looks back, and it's like, yeah, he knows it's not one of his guys, but he almost knows like, oh, that's trouble. You know what I mean? And he sends some people after it.
The gunshots from the Weird.
The good.
Oh, the good. Okay.
The good kills one of his guys like while he's going up, and then he sends some guys back to go look for it, and he sends the guy back, and the guy's walking through and opens the door and just gets like blasted 10 feet back.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
even like when the Weird shoots up the train car in the back to get the I don't even think he's there to steal the map. I think he's just there to rob them, right? And it's like that's the
correct.
richest people on the train is in that train car, and he knew that. So he just kind of like haphazardly attained the map. Um,
And they're in
yeah,
the front, right? Because they're connected to the front of the. Because as you've seen, you've seen Snowpiercer. That's where the rich people are. So
I have not seen Snowpiercer, but
doesn't matter. That's where the rich
okay,
people are.
got it. Okay, that's fine.
That's not a spoiler. So, and I love how like right after the Weird, you're like, how is he going to get out of this? Because the bad has a ton of guys there, and then so the Weird starts the train back up, and then gets off on his motorcycle and is just kind of riding away.
The coolest line so far in the film was when he's commissioning the bat. The boss is commissioning the bat to steal back the map, and he's like, "Yeah, so you're gonna have to catch the train when it's at the stop." And he's like, "We don't wait for the train. We stop the train." And then it shows him like blowing the rails up. I was like, "Okay, that's badass." And you're right, he leads the drama because partially he's the antagonist, but he's also the most melodramatic out of the whole thing, you know?
Yeah, when he has this sort of like joie de vivre, like he makes everything more than what it needs
Than
to
what it
be.
is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like the way he stops the train with like the fire on it and all the smoke. It's just like he's got showmanship, right? Black
He
eyeliner.
knows maybe I was wrong. He knows where the camera is, so he knows what the best angle to do stuff at.
Right. No, absolutely. And I love too the way as the Weird is driving off on his motorcycle, the good is shooting at the bad, who the bad's shooting at Weird. So then the good and the bad start shooting at each other. And then there's just these dudes who I said earlier are probably like they're the ghost marketplace thugs. I think they might be either Chinese or Mongolian or something like that. And they're just watching this and they're like, oh, that's interesting. What's going on? He's shooting at him. Hey, is that guy? Okay, we should probably get whatever he stole. We're just very nonchalant about the whole thing.
Yeah, especially this being in a different language and how many people there are in each gang, like the black market gang, and then you got the bads gang, and I think there's another gang, and I'm not even talking about the Japanese army. I'm talking about just gangs and like affiliations. It gets muddled, and I'm like, would it be easier for me to understand this if I understood Korean, or is it just complicated and you just do your best to try to keep up with it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It almost doesn't matter, right? Because and as we're talking about this, there's going to be points coming up where it's like you see people going. So next, the Weird goes to this area and he meets his friend. And he tells him about the map, and he's like, "Oh, I think it might be a treasure map." So he tells his friend, like, "Hey, you go find out what you can about this." And he doesn't trust his friend to take the map, and you're like, I wonder, if he doesn't trust him, then we shouldn't trust him. And it kind of, you find out that he shouldn't have trusted him. But it's like, I think in that spot and then in the next spot, there's several different groups maybe chasing after him, or it's confusing who's chasing after him. Because like in this part, he's asleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he hears someone knocking at his door, and the guy's like, "Oh, this is Byung Chun."
Yeah.
And he's and then the guy's like, "Shit, why did I tell him my name?" And then he shoots through the door, and those guys chase after him. And then they immediately go to the bad who has just killed his boss who put him on this mission. And it's so funny. He stabs his boss, and then he's just like, "Oh, I've killed him." And then the boss starts crawling away. It's like, why are you crawling away now, man? Just like wait a few minutes until he like. I mean, probably it's like the 1920s, 30s, whatever. You're gonna die anyway, but like you've secured it by like letting him see that you're still alive. But they go to the bad and they're like, oh, he was at this place, but he escaped. And I was like, all right, were your guys already there, or did you just know about it? And then later on, we see the bads guys and the Ghost Marketplace gang several times, like going after the weird and good, but you don't know like who is who. They're not wearing like uniforms, so it's like very confusing who's shooting at who and what's happening.
And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but on this point that we're still talking about, when they go to kind of the second big set piece, and there's like a three-way shootout where it's the good, the weird, basically, shooting out between the two gangs. There's one where I think the bad, yeah, it was the bad pulls a gang member aside, and he's like, "Are you with them?" And he's like, "We wouldn't be with chicken shits like them." But then I was like, "So with who? Like, who are you mistaking it for?" So I think at that point there were three gangs. But yeah, I don't, whatever. But like you said, it really doesn't matter because you're kind of just following the three main guys, and that if you can follow them, everyone else kind of falls into place.
Right. And one thing I skipped over, but when the bad kills, the guy's name is Panju. Um, he has this really cool line, which is it's not like unique or anything, but he's like, people know that they must die, but they live like they never will. And it's like that's so it's a good line.
You like
Um,
that?
I did. I thought that was good writing. Um, and so then we get basically where the good is now after bad. The Ghost Market thugs are after the map, and we get now to the Ghost Market, and you can see people trailing the weird. He goes into the shack where his granny is. The granny, all the stuff with the grandma is very funny. Just like he's like talking to her, he's like, I don't know how you're still alive. You're so fucking old.
He's like, "You're gonna outlive me." And what's funny too is that when he like, if he entrusts anyone with the map, it's his granny, who he like puts her in a closet, says like, "Take the map, don't come out of the closet." And then when the big shootout comes, it's like Granny's safe, everything's okay.
And what's really funny too is he leaves grandma there. He driving out, and there's this really funny shot where he's just driving his motorcycle. The good shoots him, and the motorcycle flips like what feels like 10 times in the desert. But then the good seemingly, yeah, no, he takes him right back to the marketplace that he just
Right.
ran from to find the map. So it's like it almost he just left just for this funny bit of him flipping in the desert, which was funny.
That and like maybe that's just like they needed a scene by itself for the good and the weird to join forces.
Yeah, I agree. And so at this point, the weird tells him like about the treasure map, and he like takes him in, and he takes him into his camp, I guess. Where we this one set is like we see it one time. It's the goods like camp,
Yeah, it's
and he
like in the
has
middle of the desert with a
and he has
fire.
this
Yeah.
jail, and the weird's just like, I'm very thirsty. I'm like very very thirsty, and the guy's about to give him water, and then the good calls the guy away, so he has to like drink it out of the like off the ground. And I love when he thinks he's escaping, and he's like running through, and he's laughing, and then he just looks over, and the good's looking at him. He's like, "Are you escaping?" He's like, No. The hook came out really easily. You guys should get that fixed." He's like, "Okay, we'll go back in there."
Yeah, and you know what? We also never see like the other people with the good ever again. Like the other people at the camp.
Yeah, no, yeah, we do not see those characters again. We even hear one's name when the good calls that. I think it's a little boy, or it might be a little girl, like calls them to like come over to him, and we never see that person again.
Mm-mm. Nope. Nope. So now we have like almost this the good has the weird captive, I guess. But they're also working together to um go on the adventure of treasure hunting with this map. Um At the same time, obviously, you have the bad trying to hunt them down with the map. What I found interesting too is that there's another scene where the good, I think like this comes way later, but I just wanted to mention it now. The good and the weird set up camp, like in the middle of the desert, and they go to sleep. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the good goes to sleep, and the weird pulls a gun on him, and then it cuts to the weird escaping, and it doesn't establish like did he kill the good? Like you're as the audience, you're wondering for a second about that, right? You know what scene I'm talking about?
I know, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a little later on, and I don't think there's any chance he would have actually killed him. Like, obviously, just from a movie making perspective, you're not going to kill one of your main characters that early, especially when it's an homage to a movie where there's a standoff at the very end of it. But
Right.
I think the whole point is at that point, the good is like, oh, this is just a person. You know, we're trusting each other. We need each other. And the weird's like, nah, I don't need you. Like, I can continue because he has this like this thing about him where he just doesn't really die. Um, but before that, we get this scene where the weird's friend Mangill basically sells a copy of the map to the ghost thugs, and then the bad sits down afterwards and is like, you know, hey, I want your friend the weird, and I want the map, and the friend tells him to go fuck himself, and then just basically gets like sliced up, like continually just sliced and sliced and sliced until the good and the weird come in and save him.
So the way I understood this is that, and this is like the next big set piece, but the way I understood this was that the friend betrayed the weird to the Ghost Market gang, and then the Ghost Market gang betrayed the friend to the bad. And at that point, I thought the bad and the Ghost Market gang were kind of like sympathetic, like they were working together. Um, but not really, you find out. But I thought they were at that point, you know?
I just think it was coincidence that they both knew where to go. I didn't think they were like working with each other at all. But this does lead to probably one of the coolest action scenes, right? I guess there's three big ones from this point on.
When this happened, I was like, am I watching what I think I'm watching?
Just various pulley systems throughout this town. This guy's able to shoot and then have himself thrown around and
The dude is
just taking.
flying. He's flying above like an old Western Korean town with like a rifle, just making buckshots at like guys on roofs as he's fucking flying. I was like, this is dramatic, but I love it.
He also shoots a dude through a scope. The guy like flat, like you see his scope flash light, and then he just shoots the dude's eye out, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
I love
Yeah.
right before this though. He still has at this point he doesn't trust the weird, so he has him tied up, and he won't even give him a gun. And he's like, "I need you to run across so I can see where they're at." And he's like, "Should I go in a straight line or zigzag?" And he's like, "Okay, I'll just decide in the moment." And then you see him, he's like zigzagging, and then he's like caught on a pole, just like sitting there getting shot at. Um, and then also when he's getting thrown around by the really big dude with like the Bowser hammer,
Yeah.
and he's like, "I need my guns," and he just tosses them to him so nonchalantly, but like nowhere near him.
That was like one of my favorite moments of the movie, and he I like how quick the good thinks on his feet too, right? Like it shows that he's really intelligent. So he's like, okay, the bad guys are there, and then they're not there, and he's like, where did they go? And then the minute he's like, oh shit, they're above us, they start shooting from above him, cornering them, and he's like, how do I get above them? And that's when he's like, oh shit, if I hold on to this rope, do this pulley thing, I'll fly above there. And then he just fucking I don't like flies around on a rope. It's awesome.
It's like he had done it before.
Exactly.
And then the bad escapes and they're dragging Mangill, the friend, and I kind of missed like how they stopped him. I was like, did the good shoot the rope? And then I rewound. It's like, oh no, he just shoot the dude who was dragging him, just shot him off his horse. That's how he
Yeah.
stopped it.
Yeah.
And we never see if that guy dies. I assume he
All right,
died.
so that's another question I had for you. I didn't know if I missed something. I was pretty sure he died, but we never see it.
I mean, from the wounds, he got very fucked up. So I would
I
imagine.
love how like okay, so spoiler alert for the end of the movie for people who haven't seen it, but you're made to believe that the bad has a notorious name as the Finger Chopper, that he's the big villain way back when, known as the Finger Chopper. He chopped off his own finger, who then chopped off other people's fingers, etc., etc. He's insane finger chopping guy. And so he, I guess, knowing that he's not the finger chopper himself, obviously, knowing who is, he decide, and it's the weird, he decides to chop off the finger for his friend, but it's the dullest knife known to man, and that whole thing where he tries to chop off the finger and the knife isn't sharp enough to do so, and he's just this like dangling finger. I was like, and this is kind of where you were saying like the movie's funny, like even in like really tense scenes it still has a way to like make you laugh.
And to make someone laugh in a scene where someone's trying to chop someone's finger off, like peak comedy right there. So we next get where it's the camping scene you were talking about. And well, there's two camping scenes. First, there's the camping bads group is camping, and this random fucking dude is just like, hey, so Mr. Bad, I heard you had a duel with Weird. Some say he was better than you, but I don't know. That's crazy. Bad's like, you want to fucking see? Stand up. It's like, why are you so stupid? Like,
I was
why?
wondering about that too. Yeah.
And then the one with and I haven't seen this movie in like 10 years, right? But there's the camping scene with the good and the weird, and the good is like, yeah, Bad is a finger chopper, and that's his name. And I was like, you can kind of tell that the weird knows that's not true, that he's not the finger chopper. But I was like, I wonder how hard it is to tell if you've never seen this before, and how like good the reveal is at the end. And I think you were saying like, oh, you didn't see it coming.
No, I didn't see it coming at all. I can't even tell you, like, I can't even now go back and watch it and be like, oh yeah, you know, this moment was no, because it's been ruined for me. So, but honestly, when it was revealed at the end that the weird is the finger chopper, I was just like, oh, cool, okay.
And then we get I like how the weird is telling his dream to the good guy about like, oh, I want to buy my land back. And then weird can't even stay up long enough to hear the good's dream. He's just like, no, I'm going to bed. I don't fucking care about your dream.
But he's not really asleep, because in a few moments when the good goes to sleep, he wakes up and points a gun at the good.
Yep. And then he just takes off. And we get this small scene where Byung Chun follows the friend's map, and it just leads to the ocean, and they're just like, fuck, we went the wrong way. And I don't know how they end up finding their way back to finding where the weird is. They like meet up with the Japanese and the bad and all that, chasing after the weird, but somehow they make it back. But the next scene that's pretty good is the weird stops at like kind of like a brothel, and he's got basically like this opium dealer, but this opium dealer knows exactly who he is, and he wants the treasure map because he wants to use it to help, you know, the Koreans prosper and overthrow the Japanese is what he says, which is bullshit. But like, I was like, one, when this was happening and I didn't remember how the movie ended, I was like, it kind of sounds like this is like oil, you know what I mean? Or like, I was like, what is this? You know, this isn't just going to be like gold that's going to like do this, you know, it has to be. And like, so the oil definitely makes sense.
You want to know what I thought?
What?
I didn't think it was oil. I didn't think it was like a physical thing at all. I thought maybe the map was like misinterpreted, and to like the common eye, to them it might look like a treasure map, but then like you give it to like a military power, like a general or something, and it's like reveals some sort of weak point in someone's like overtaking system, like for the Japanese or for the Koreans. So I thought it was like more of like a mind thing. I didn't think it was something as simple as like gold or oil or something like that.
Maybe the treasure was just like the friends that we made along
You
the
made
way.
along the way. Yeah, shut the fuck up.
So I love the scene where they're getting weird high, and he like keeps getting mad at the girl blowing smoke in his face. He's like, "What are you doing? I can't breathe. Stop doing this."
And then they roofie him, and yeah. And then he was like, Mr. Independent.
And then we get not one, but two dudes getting stabbed in the beehole to death.
I thought you were just gonna say butthole or asshole or in the butt. I did not expect beehole, but yes, they did.
Yeah, this is
Did you
a
say beehole
family-friendly
because
entertainment.
I was gonna say, did you say beehole because children are present in that scene?
Nah, it's just what came out, honestly. And it is very hilarious. And I love how he tells them he stabs the dude in the asshole and then tells the kids to close their eyes before he kicks it deeper in to kill the dude. And then does the exact same thing to the leader, the opium dealer, later on.
I'm pretty sure the little girl does that to the opium dealer.
Well, all the kids, they stab it in him, and then I think he forces it in harder. Oh, like you needed man strength to get that thing up there.
The killing kick, yeah.
And now we
And
kind
then they come to like investigate. I don't know who it is. Like the cop, and they just
it's the
have like,
Japanese.
oh, okay, it is the Japanese. The Japanese military comes to like investigate, and it's just these two guys face down with their butts in the air and like fucking spears sticking out of it.
One of the generals was like, "This is the most gruesome thing I've ever seen in my entire life." And like knowing like what they had done to people, that makes it even a little funnier. Even it's like, so
That's true. Yeah.
we're getting basically to the start of the end right here, and we're probably like got like 40 minutes left in the movie, but the Japanese, the Ghost Market gang, the bad, and the good all converge on this basically fucking like straight out of a Western ghost town.
Yeah.
And they find the weird there. And for some reason, he stops there. It's just basically the starting point of the chase, right? And this chase scene is like, it's kind of reminiscent of, and this came out first, but it's a little reminiscent of Mad Max Fury Road.
I was gonna say Mad Max. Yeah.
Because it just goes on forever. There's like it's all action. It's just like really well done. This whole
And there's layers to it too, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just one, trail following another trail. It's linear as like they're all going in a straight line, but when the good comes up behind everyone, especially the Japanese army starts like shooting cannons at them, and then the good comes up behind him and them and then just starts taking out everyone just one shot after another. I was like, this is cool.
It absolutely was. And there's this one part where like a motorcycle, like first of all these horses are keeping up with the weird and like catching up to him. And I was like, that's fucking doesn't make sense. He's on a motorcycle. I was also wondering how he kept gassing this thing up and like she still had it, especially he crashed in the desert, but
Yeah.
neither here nor there. But then at one point another motorcycle like catches up to him and like pulls up right next to him. He just fucking shoots him.
Because I thought, obviously, like the director wanted you to think at that moment, like, oh shit, like his equal, like someone who could actually fuck him up, taken out super easily, barely an inconvenience. And then one of my favorite parts is that when the car comes up to them, they do like this exchange where like one guy goes to shoots him or stabs him, and he ends up in the sidecar, and then he jumps over to the car, and then he kind of just abandons his motorcycle, and then he's just in the car now, but not before finding a bunch of TNT in the back of the car. And then he throws the guy driving the car out of the car just to be revealed that he stuck lit TNT in his like back pocket. And then all you see is just an explosion in the far distance. That whole thing, the way it plays out, the way that it establishes how he lit the TNT thing, because then it established like 5 scenes before that he has a lighter because he was going to smoke. Everything is so good. Sorry, I just wanted to get all that off because it was so effective. And now the way we have it is he's driving in a car away from everyone, especially the biggest threat is the Japanese right now.
Yeah, and one thing that's cool too is so like you have the ghost people, the ghost market thugs chasing him, and the bad guys chasing him. And then for a while, they don't even realize that they're next to each other. And then they kind of start shooting each other a little bit, but mostly they're focused on the weird, right? But
Hmm.
then you have the Japanese start bombing all of these guys, and that's just like to thin out the numbers. It's from a story making perspective of how do you
Sure,
get
sure.
this down to the final three. But then you're like, all right, well, how are the Japanese going to get out of it? And then first of all, the good just coming through and blasting fucking people is so awesome. Like the
Hmm.
way he like flips his gun into cock it and shit is so cool. And that at one point he shoots one of the Japanese guys with like the automatic
Machine
gun,
gun.
and then
Yeah.
it takes out an entire another truck. But then the scene with the dynamite where he sets all the dynamite up, but he can't light it in time because the Japanese get too close, and so then
Yeah,
the
that
good
was
shoots it to
good.
blow it up. And
And the fact that the weird knows how skilled the good is, so all he has to do is like look at the good, look at the dynamite, look back at the good looks at him, the good looks at the dynamite, and he already knows to duck behind his car because he knows he's gonna shoot it.
there's also during this cool part where the bad gets shot off of his horse, and then he just shoots
Mm.
one of his own dudes to take that guy's horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then later on, another guy. This is right after the weird escaped the Japanese in this canyon, and then like was back out in the desert with no one around, but then was on top of another canyon. Um, but the bad is like he's basically by himself. Some of his dudes run off, and then this guy is dying on the ground. He's like, "You're supposed to fight to the end," and like just shoots the guy in the head, just like at the end to establish like he is not a good
He's the
person.
bad. So
Um,
yeah, so this basically puts enough distance between the weird and everyone else. And the weird, believe it or not, at this point, he's still following the map, and he gets to like what looks like, I don't know, the remnants of a ghost town. Like all that's
yeah.
left is like maybe a house left standing and a shack. And I love like he goes through the door and it's just like nothing there.
And I really love the binoculars joke where he's looking, he like senses someone might be there, and he looks through his binoculars and it turns this one way that we haven't looked, and like there's a gun pointed at him. And then right after the joke of the good's like, all right, well, you dig, and he's like, wait, why am I the only one that digging? I'm not going to be the only one that digs.
And he's like, "Oh, no, no, no. You mean I dig a little bit and then you dig?" And the good's like, "No, you dig." But before that could happen, whatever they're standing on, which looks like basically a foundation of a house. Later on, we kind of realize it's an oil rig, right? But um, the house thing, the foundation collapses, and that causes enough time for the bad to catch up. And so now this is where we have the standoff, and it's basically like a pride thing, right? Like this could probably easily be solved, even to the fact that the bad had a jump on both of them, but he wants to prove that he's the best gunman in the land, so he challenges them.
Yeah, and he sells the good on it very easily, but the weird is like, I'm not doing this, and he just kind of keeps shooting at him, and then he has the line of like, "You still got my finger chopper." And there's one thing we didn't mention, we sort of alluded to, but there's this point where this one guy starts talking to the bad early on. He's like, "Don't follow the weird, because that I've never seen." That guy's gone through so many situations where he should have died, and he never dies. He's like, "Do not go up against him." And of course, the bad stabs that dude in the throat. But so they keep tempting, the weird with money and this and that, uh, and then he says the whole finger chopper line, pulls off the glove, and he's like, the weird is like, I left that behind in Korea. I don't do that anymore. Um, but then the weird is just finally like, fuck it, I never die anyway, so you guys are gonna see. Like, you shouldn't have done this.
Can we also talk about the wind whistling through the metal finger joint of the bad, and it's making that like sound? And yeah, it was just great.
Well, then there's also this like Western music that's definitely like an homage to the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but it's also got these like hip hop elements to it too. Like, is a really
Right,
good song.
right.
And then we have a Korean standoff, and everyone gets shot a whole lot,
Whole
and
lot.
it just ends with them all on the ground. Like they're probably all going to die, but we don't know. And then it just kind of fades to black. And as it's fading, we see the oil pop up, and it's like, oh, that's oil. And it kind of ties into earlier when we were talking about his friend was reading the map, and he's like, what do he say? He's like, buried, excavate. You have to bring it up in heaps and heaps. Like it's something along those lines. It's like, oh, okay, like it all makes sense now. What this was.
Well, they saw it. They get to see what it was before they, pass away. But I don't know if you noticed this, and maybe I'm reaching, but the whole like three monkeys, like see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil.
Okay.
When the thing went like when the oil thing initially popped off, the bad was the one who heard it pop off, and then the weird was the one who said, "What is that?" As in like he sees it first, and then the good says he says something. He's like, "Oh, there it is," or something like that. And I just was like, did they mean to like one initially heard it, one initially saw it, and one initially spoke of it? And I was just wondering, it's like the threes and the good, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. I thought, I don't know. I drew my conclusions on like maybe there was a theme of that there in that moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Or it's just a coincidence.
Like, well, so the red that was flowing on them represented blood because they were dying. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like, a lot of times we talk about, do you want definitive endings or not? I like this one though, in that it basically shows you the ending, but whether one of these guys lives or not is really up to you. And especially when you have the whole like, not all of them are, no one's just good or bad or weird. They all have their own stuff. And like the whole, the weird doesn't die thing. It allows you to kind of speculate on how things played out, but you really did get to see the ending of it. And I mean, the bad got shot a lot more than anyone else.
Yeah. Especially by the good. Okay, so a couple of things I want to talk about the ending. My points are, one, you are pretty sure that you want the good to live. Like he's the most morally righteous character, but also you're more emotionally connected to the weird, and maybe you don't give a shit about the bad. But by the time that shootout happens and they're all on the ground bleeding to death, you're kind of conflicted in at least I was, in the fact that it's fine if they all die, and then I kind of want none of them to die. Like you become way more conflicted than what you initially thought, what you wanted at the beginning of this.
Well, one reason I think you become conflicted is because, and this is like, the good, how good is the good, right? Because he has his gun drawn on the bad, and this is this guy he's supposed to be taking in, and the bad's like, oh, we should have a standoff, we should play a game to see who's the best. And if he was really good, he'd just be like, no, I have to take you in. It's my job to take you in. I'm a bounty hunter or whatever. But he's like, no, I'll play. And it's like that, being that flippant with like life and death. You're like a little bit like, all right, you're not that morally great of a character.
Yeah, it's like the bad's bad, the good's good, and the weird is morally gray. And then by the time you get there, it's like they're all morally compromised, and then maybe the bad isn't as morally compromised as you initially thought, because you didn't understand why he had this like vendetta against this poor guy. And then you understand why, and when you do, you're like, oh, fuck the weird, go the bad. Like the bad has a point. And yeah, so it's very interesting. Now, the ending, the very, very ending. I mean, the credits even roll, and then this is like a mid-credit scene sort of ending. You have the two wanted posters, the bad and the weird. And then the bad is basically crossed out and marked dead. And then they exchange the weird to like a different picture of him, and his bounty has gone up extremely, like by 6-7 times higher. and then you just see like a kind of a shadowy character looking at the wanted posters and moving on. I take it that that's the good.
I did not see the credit scene.
You have no idea what I'm talking about. You just immediately stopped the movie right when the credits started rolling.
Dude, it was bedtime, man. It was like 10:30. All right.
Okay, so basically,
No, you already described it perfectly. I know it
Okay.
happened. I mean, so the bad is dead and the weird is not, which is what was my takeaway too from it. Like it's what.
But the
seemed to be-
good is not either. I don't think.
right, yeah, no, I agree. It is funny as you're watching the shootout though. You're like, why are they both shooting the weird so much? And then towards the end, the bad gets really fucking shot up. But yeah, that all makes sense to me. Like it ending that way, and those the two that lives. Like that is kind of how you would foresee it happening.
The weird got shot up quite a bit. The one who makes like logically the most sense to live is the good, because he didn't get shot as much as the other two. But
well, because they don't. No one has any history with him. And that's the other thing too. It's kind of funny. Like it reminded me a little bit of Old Boy in that the bad has this vendetta against the weird and is like, this guy, he da 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 da, and the weird's like fucking Thanos. I don't even know who you are. You know what I mean? He acts like he's like barely remembers it. It's like, I cut off a lot of fingers in Korea. All right, like you're gonna have to be more specific.
It's like, dude, I cut off one of your fingers. It's not like I cut off 4 or 5. Chill, you know.
You know what my name used to be? It used to be Dick Chopper. All right, but I changed the fingers. So
but look, I
need to chill.
Please, when you rewatch this movie with your wife, please watch that end credits scene. Okay, it's not at the very end of the credits; it's kind of like a mid roll, but you get the full picture there. But yeah, no, man, I really like this movie. You said this is our last Korean movie of the month, and it is. It's actually our last Korean movie of the year, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a lot more Korean movies to do on this podcast, because I find them very interesting. And you know what? I just want to say one more thing is that back when we were talking about Mother, I said it's very hard that it's very rare that any of these characters are vindicated in Korean movies. And there's not really like a redemption arc for anyone. And it kind of goes along with this too, is that because you view characters even at the last second as like morally gray or different than what you kind of perceive them to be before, no one is really justified in this thing. And I'm curious to watch more Korean flicks about, just in general, and to see if that is just a very common trope of this, like, you might be wrong, but there's no point in proving you right sort of thing.
Yeah. And one thing I want to end on is, at the time, this was the most expensive South Korean movie ever made.
No shit.
But it's obviously been clearly surpassed. And the other thing is, so I told you this is a Korean spaghetti Western, and I was like, all right, so what do we call that? And I went to Ashley and I was like, what would be the spaghetti version? Would be the Korean spaghetti dish. And then I just read an interview with the director, and he's like, yeah, I like to call this a kimchi Western. I was like, son of a bitch. That's like the best.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, it's great. Kimchi Western.
Because Ashley came up with some stuff, and I was like, it's not going to work. That's not going to be it.
Because ramen is more Japanese, and pho is Vietnamese, and
so those would be, if you had a Vietnamese Western, it would be a pho. The thing is, you can't do a pho Western, though, right?
Right.
Because then it's like sounds like a fake Western. A ramen Western, though, if it's for a Japanese one, is like absolutely perfect. But I think kimchi works really well, and he was describing how like kimchi is spicy and vibrant, which is like what he thinks this movie is. And I think that's like a perfect way to describe it. Like it's
brilliant.
Vibrant, it's funny,
Brilliant.
It's action packed. Like this is like a great way to end. It's a palate cleanser from the other things we did, and so I'm glad we ended on this one.
Same.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched the good, the bad, the weird.